TV presenter. I'm waiting for the cue.
Oh
I
God,
see.
that's really got the pressure on.
Have we got the cue? We are live.
We normally would have started on the egg whites. That would have been
I
the start
assume
of the
we
song.
were.
Which
Hello,
is-
everyone.
Oh my God.
That could be for the show. I could actually do like extra little bonuses, like
What?
a little facts, like don't use a cup
For the
of
show that we
spinner
are
to do
live
egg
on now.
whites.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Really interesting. We can continue the show
Yeah.
about the egg whites.
So are the things I find interesting, people don't think, because that's a useful thing to know. Okay.
I'm
yeah,
just loving
like the whispering.
Yeah. ASMR.
ASMR.
Let's leave it now because you'll go on a
Okay.
rant.
That's interesting to
Yeah,
people.
I
I'd
know.
sooner watch a YouTube video with facts like
Yeah.
the one I said,
Yeah.
rather than somebody whispering. What does MSNR stand for?
ASMR.
Audio, sound?
Yeah, I think it's auto sensory meridian response. It's something like that. I don't know. Don't know how it works.
Negin.
Hello.
Hey.
How do you pronounce your
Hello,
surname?
Okay,
Go.
that's a trick. And then I'll let you into another secret as well. But let's just start with a surname. It's Negin
Yeah.
Shiraghaei.
Shiraghaei.
Oh, that's lovely.
Oh.
And then there's another part to it.
Yeah.
Which I
Oh, yeah, it's
skip it.
middle, yeah.
Yes, that's not a middle name.
Ah.
It's like the whole family is Shiraghaei Kootenaei. So I had to come, when I came to this country, I was like, okay,
Got to make a decision.
I have to make a decision, change it, and then I use the first part. And even in Iran, like people, it's not easy thing to pronounce usually,
Yeah.
but then people got used to it, and then now it's like Negin Shiraghaei, and it's like normal. But then it's been an incident. Me and three of my crazy Iranian friends, we went to Portugal, and then like at some point we were missing a flight. And the guy was like announcing our names, and then he got to my name, and
Oh,
he just
no.
like, I'm not going to pronounce that. Just like skipped it.
Just the initial.
So did the
Yeah.
two friends
So you
and their friend.
Yeah, exactly. So just be happy. It's call me Negin, and then I think that works.
Negin.
Karem,
Right.
is your surname, is it?
Karem,
Is
our
that
producer.
Karem.
He's too busy
Is
listening
your,
to the
um,
levels.
He's listening to another podcast. Trying to pass the time as quickly as possible.
You guys
Your,
are bored.
your surname, Ishik? Ishik. That's your full name,
Ushik.
though.
That's Turkish. And means like lover.
How did I not know that?
Ah, that's Ashik. Okay. Light.
Light.
Okay.
So how did you know that?
We are neighbors. Neighbor countries.
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
Do Turkey and Iran share a border?
Yeah.
Is it just?
yeah.
Is it?
Cultural
Is it
border.
only a little bit? Is it presumably?
No, it's big, and there is a lot of relation between, like, I visit my family because I cannot go back to Iran. I visit my family in Istanbul, so I just came back from 6 weeks in Istanbul.
So you can't go back there?
No,
I didn't think
I
things were that
can't.
bad. So you're BBC, what did we say? BBC,
BBC
journalist?
Persian
Yes.
reporter.
Journalist.
Yes.
Now you've had problems with...
So what happened was, like, BBC decided, like, BBC had Persian service for more than 70 years.
7-0?
7-0.
Oh, really, that far
So
back?
they started the radio during the World War II.
Yeah.
And then in 2009, BBC decided we're going to have, on top of website and radio, we're going to have a television. So they recruit journalists from Iran. And then we came to London. Part of us came from Iran to do the job, part from like America, different countries. And then the 2009 presidential election happened. So we were live, we were like young journalists, like without any like background in television, because in Iran television is monopolized by the government. So we were so eager to make justice to our audience. So we were like 24/7 doing rolling news. And it was a really fascinating time because BBC became the first and the only source of news
Yeah, I
about
can
what's
imagine,
happening
yeah.
in a country. And that was the time that UGC, user-generated videos came to us.
Right.
And then like we had to put in place for the first time, like in the history of BBC, how to deal with
Keep
these
it
sort
closer
of...
to you. It's not the BBC, so the equipment's a bit
It's
cheaper.
not the BBC.
Yeah.
I forgot. Let's not get into that conversation.
Okay.
So they had to kind of come up with a solution of like how to verify this kind of material. So
Yeah.
like our the whole social media generation that now exists, it has started a lot of it, like we practiced it in 2009 because of that. And then the Iranian government didn't like it. So they started putting pressure on our families. So my dad was going through cancer at the time, and he was like a stage 4 cancer. It was like a really intensive chemotherapy, and they called him and said, "You're so sick, you cannot go back. There's no chance. You don't know if you live long enough to see your daughter. So tell her to come back."
Oh
and
my
work.
God.
Okay.
So it's
How
like
nefarious that is. That's how low that is.
Oh, exactly. But it's just for them, it was like making sure, because for 4 decades they managed to close the country, not allowing anyone to get the news from outside. And this was like the turning point for them, that they realized. And people, like I heard a lot afterwards from people who were in Iran at the time, saying like, for the first time, we were like seeing other people are thinking like us, because we could see the result, like we could see other people on the street. So that was the big, I think, like a stake into their heart, like they got them angry. And then because BBC is trying to be balanced and impartial, I'm not getting into like how much we are, there's always mistakes, but that made a lot of people inside the government, like an audience of BBC. So after a while, I had a friend like whose dad is like really high in the the government Revolution Guardian Guards, and he was saying like, my dad, whenever he wants to leak something, like he said, "Oh, I've heard it on BBC."
Right.
So it's like became that thing that even them like talking to each other, we would use it. So it became dangerous. And you as a face, as a journalist who are reporting on that sort of stuff, you became the enemy of the state.
Yeah.
So it took like 7 years, step by step. They approached people, they tried to change their mind. And they arrested a couple of people who went back to Iran, and then only one of them managed to come back, and the other one stayed in Iran. 3 of them stayed in Iran. So it became this hostile environment. And then at last year, 2018, in September, they put a blanket ban on freeze on all our assets on 152 BBC Persian journalists.
Wow.
To just say, any of your assets are
Just gone now.
Just
or frozen.
Freeze, frozen. So we don't know what's gonna happen. Like, it's like one of those things that they can use the justice system in a way that you can always be under this blanket. So there's no need to take it to trial. There's no need to. So just that was they were trying to create an incentive for people to say, okay, if I leave BBC, my asset gonna become unfroze.
Right. Okay.
So journalism in Iran, if you're in Iran now, what's that happening there?
So it's
not a free. There's no free speech.
There's no free speech as.
I mean, how?
We were talking about normal and abnormality. Not normal. I can say it that way. So there are so many things that you can get arrested for.
Right.
So I know a lot of journalists right now in prison because they were like reporting on corruption, like financial corruption of one sector or company or here, or like a lot of like in general. Like, there was someone got like 11 years imprisonment right now, like the other day, because overall 11 years he has to go to prison because he was a caricaturist and he was like a comic, and then talking about problems in a funny way and that sort of stuff. And then not even like there is this self-censorship in Iran that you know where is the cross. But the toleration is becoming less and less.
Really? Okay. And so it's just everything, basically. You don't know what, so everything's a grey area.
Yeah, because there's a lot of economic problems.
Business who's tied into,
hold the grasp on people, so it takes time.
So when did you first get involved in journalism? When did that start? Like, you left school and then something was...
Yeah, I did left
student
school.
Newspaper?
I did university. I didn't finish my university because of like what happened.
Ah.
But it was political related. So when I was choosing my university degree, my parents were like, okay, you can't do this, you're not going to go to human studies, because the only thing was becoming a lawyer, and then it was so much. And then I didn't want to become a doctor. So the third option for me was like going through mathematics. And even so I wanted to study mathematics at university. And first of all, architecture, and then second, mathematics. And then I went to choose universities, and my parents were like, you're not going to Tehran University because it's politically active. You're not going to Polytechnic University because it's politically active. So my first choice was Shahid Beheshti, Melli University, which is like The head of the university for years was the brother-in-law of the supreme leader. So it's like nothing happens.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Everything is just quiet.
Yeah.
And then one month in Ramadan, which is like the holy month, everyone was fasting. Some of my a student from the physics department, he was smoking a cigarette in like behind the school, like somewhere hidden. And then one teacher who is the brother-in-law of the supreme leader saw him and beat him up. He came down from
because he was smoking.
because he was
Ramadan.
smoking during Ramadan.
Oh, I didn't realize smoking.
And his nose got broken. And I was like, how can you guys stay quiet? So I started doing demonstration. My flat became this kind of like get together, writing.
Over the broken nose?
Yeah.
Well, the violent attack.
No, it was a violent attack. And he wasn't doing it in public. So there's even in Islamic law, there is no grant for that sort of
But you know you can't win. If this thing is going to end bad.
Yeah. So I did a lot of mistakes back then. So because a lot of people were scared, we said, okay, we're not gonna shout, we're not gonna do any slogans, we're gonna do a silence demonstration.
Yeah, that always works. Yeah.
And always works, but then you need someone to talk, and that someone was me.
Oh.
So I got to trouble, and then after a while,
I mean, it seems like you really went. You know, if you're going to take on someone, so it was the brother-in-law of the.
It's not a little
yes. I think I was so naive and like brave, which I don't know where it came from, but like I thought if I wanted,
not even some low-down minister.
Yeah, it's not the headmaster.
Brother-in-law.
Boring. Come on.
Yeah, true.
I needed some adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I became a news presenter as well. Like, adrenaline rush. But then like that led me to journalism, and then I
Hang on, but what happened? Did anything? You do your protest?
We did the protest.
How many people?
60, 70 people sitting down in the middle.
And they left you alone, and it ended. No problems.
No, they let us. They came. They were watching us, and they were like having this like walkie-talkies and talking to each other, but they were crowding at us and that sort of thing. But then we were like, it's like an hour sitting, and we're gonna clear it out. But later, I saw the problem. So like my. The head of the security picked me up from the street in front of my house because like I was taking a cab every day, like wanted to come to school from somewhere. And I didn't know him. Yeah. And I got to the car and he said, like at the end, he said like, I'm going that way. And I was like, which way? How do you know? And then we went and I said like, I get off here. And he said, no, Tajrish, I'm going to Beheshti University. Don't worry. And I got there and he said nothing. It was like one of his techniques to intimidate you. So I got to the front of university and got out and I paid him and he said, no, Miss Shiraghaei, we're fine. And I was like, we're fine? And then I looked at him. That was the first time I saw his face because he was front seat and I was in the back. I was like, I know you? And then he drove off. And I was like, wow, what happened to me? And then that started with like he came to the door of the university, he got my card, a student card, confiscated it, didn't give it back to me later, and then like
just little.
Like
so he would have been what, someone from the secret police or?
No, it's like every university have a. I don't know how to translate it. Like there's so many different moral system that happens in the universities. So he wasn't the head of Basij, which is the militia group. He was the head of a student moral.
Yeah, I sort of get the idea. Kind of like almost the moral police.
And he had like the executive power.
Right.
Yeah.
They are the ones who can put you out of university or allow you to.
And that's in the university, this role.
But then the thing is like it became so like a normal thingy. Like they drag it so long that there's no ground for going back and say, what is the reason behind it? That is what they do to a lot of students. So they just gradually dismiss them. Or at some point they get even really good marks in exams. To go to like for master degree or PhD, and they don't just through the choosing system. There's a lot of these parallel systems that are making sure.
Talk about the actual teaching systems in the universities. Are they all sort of geared one way? they're quite free.
Free, so you learn. So they're
Like politically,
They're not
what would you be
updated.
learning?
oh yeah, nothing.
Yes.
Okay, because if you say that to Iranians, like we would be like, no, we are learning, and we produce a lot
Yeah,
of good
yeah,
students
yeah.
for
Yeah.
foreign universities, and a
But
lot
just
of
anything to do with that thing, you've got to go overseas for.
With politics, yes.
Yeah.
With learning the modern politics, yes.
Right. Okay. I see. So historical politics. What do you learn? What would you learn?
It's all from one point of view.
Right. It's just.
Right. Okay.
I had to pass like this course about like the historic war on Islam, and I was studying pure mathematics.
Right.
Come on, like
Yeah, yeah,
why
yeah.
should
Yeah.
I go through that, or like learning Quranic verses for that?
Yeah.
It's-
Quran
it's-
verses for the
Quran.
mathematics because you must bang.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's really whatever you're doing. It's just the toe the party line.
Keep
as
your
it
head
were.
down. Don't get involved. in
It's
certain
different
things.
from China or North Korea. So it's like
Yeah.
Iranians, they fought a lot during, these years. They've been pushing the boundaries every time they could. But it became this disfigured society with a culture that doesn't fit together, because from the childhood you learn to lie. Like the first thing they tell you
right,
when you get to a school is like, oh yeah, we listen to, because I grew up in like 80s. I was born in 81. So during that time, it was the most horrible, violent part of the state. State
Which one was
governing.
the revolution? Was that 79?
79.
Yeah.
So during the 80, there were a lot of mass executions in the prisons, and like my brother got caught on the street because he was wearing shorter sleeves, and he came back home with painted hand. So he was
Get the
15
paint.
years old.
Oh, dear.
So I grew up in that
Right.
era, but now I see women are fighting for their right to not wearing hijab. They're fighting for their right, and it happened on everyday basis.
Right.
Like you fight every day
Yeah.
for everything.
Every day, all the
But
time.
then back then, like even now, it's still the same, but less. Back then, they would like the first day at the school, like my parents came to me and said, "Okay, there are a lot of things we do at home that are fine, and we talk about a lot of things. They're fine. You go to a school, you don't talk about this to other people. You don't say.
Yeah.
You say you pray. You say if they ask you if your parents are praying, you say yes.
Yeah.
If they're watching foreign movies, you say no. If they're listening to music, you say no. So they teach you to
Just-
lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got
And then
to-
they created this society that
Yeah.
is corrupted right now. It's massively corrupted. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what is the latest index, but what the sanctions didn't help either. But it is in the roots of that society they created, that lying is good.
So could it almost all be that, if everyone in Iran all got together and went all en masse, it's all bullshit, we're all listening to the Killers
Yeah.
or whoever. That could
They
be it.
tried
the first
to
person?
do that, but then it didn't.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, it was brutally suppressed, like in 2009.
But I was going to say that was when there was quite a lot of protesting in the street,
Yeah.
wasn't there? And it seemed like, maybe this could be one of those turning.
Around Tahrir Square. What year was that?
No, that's
It was after
yeah.
after 2000, after the Iranian Green Movement.
Oh, that was after.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I mean, I remember watching a documentary about Tahrir Square and just seeing like young people in front being run over by armoured vehicles, and you think, I remember watching it and thinking, we've got nothing to complain about, man. Like nothing to complain about. Like that's what they're fighting against. Forget the iPhone and the iTunes and Facebook and all that. They're literally being run over by armoured vehicles en masse.
Yeah. I mean, how so? Because even when there is a protest, how is that even reported on, or is it not?
Social
at all?
media. That's
It's
it.
now
Is it
social
comes on-
media,
Yeah.
but yeah, the government doesn't
Yeah, there's
report
nothing.
on that. Yeah.
So it's not even a case of there were troublemakers and we put it down.
At some point they started because it was so massive they couldn't hide
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But if it's small and they can say it doesn't exist, they say it doesn't exist.
Wow, that's
I remember
crazy.
I
It's
can't
unusual.
remember where it was. Might have been China. It was the BBC reporter, and they heard that the soldiers were after them because they knew they were there. And
At
they
what, at
just-
Tiananmen? Or
Yeah, I
just
think
in
it was,
general?
and it was. Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, because it was a long time ago. And she was saying when they had the copies of the stuff that was going on, and they were reporting it back to the BBC. That was the only way it was getting out. And they had to sneak all the videos up, but they had to make 10 copies of the video, and one of them had to go that way. And she said, I literally had one up my top, and I was climbing over a wall rather than go through the hotel reception to get my stuff to leave.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way the message was getting out, that was through like the BBC.
Because how does anything get in or out of Iran? I mean, I don't mean my source's name is and his phone number, but like just in general.
No, it's like a lot of people have access to. So the government bans like
Twitter,
satellites, Twitter. Like if they confiscate a satellite dish in your house, you might be, fined or like have to do something or anyway. But then people always find their ways.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So even like everyone is using VPNs in Iran.
What's VPN?
So it's a virtual private network. So it's basically your own personal Wi-Fi sort of thing. I don't know.
It's hacking.
I cannot give you it's like a platform that they created, and it's like good for anonymity. So even like as a daily user of internet,
I know what you're talking about, right? Yeah.
But then it doesn't reveal your IP address.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing, and
like the
they
onion
can
router,
go around the banning.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, because it was like when I was in China, you couldn't get on things like Facebook, Instagram, or whatever.
When were you in China?
About a year ago. Just on holiday.
Oh, okay.
But you couldn't get it on Wi-Fi, but you could if you put on your mobile data.
Mobile data would work.
But then you'd probably get in trouble for that if that was caught.
Well,
was that a fine, or was that just
not as a tourist? Depends what you're doing. I mean, if you're posting saying, here's some secret footage of blah, 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 they would just check what you were doing. But if you're just, here's me on the Great Wall going with my mum, then they're probably not going to worry about that.
I listened to a BBC, it might be on the World Service actually, and it was about these medical people that went to North Korea, and this was the early 90s, and so the guy was just reporting on what he'd seen, and he said they were supposed to be students when they were there, but they were actually doctors who worked in the profession, and he said when we'd been around the surgeries and all that, he said they were using equipment from the 50s, like they got nothing like from the 50s, mate.
But Iran is a modern.
Yeah.
Aside from attitudes, it's a modern function.
My favourite restaurant. It's a bit low to take it down.
Come on,
my favourite restaurant, which is it closed, and nobody used to go in there, and it was a Persian restaurant. Well, I used to keep it open,
right?
But it did the best rice. I still to this day, because I've never been. I don't know what it was. It was rice with sort of. It's like I don't know, something yellow sprinkled on it.
It's saffron.
Oh, that rings a bell, yeah.
Yes.
And it was a Persian, and what was the name of it? Polo? Is Polo rice?
Polo, yeah.
Polo's rice, yeah. I don't know why I took it there, because I've just completely derailed to say, I've never told anybody.
No, but I have to admit, Iranian rice is really good because we cook it in a different way. We have this fantastic thing called burnt rice.
Burnt rice.
Yes. No, but you can call it crispy rice.
Okay.
So it's basically crispizing, like the bottom of the pan. So I've been in Jordan, and I was like hanging out with Jordanian friends, and I was like, I cooked for them, and they were like, we throw away this, like you killed the rice. I was like, no, this is the best part of it. Don't do that.
Yes, the polo means well, but it's annoyed me because it was fantastic, and it was 10 feet from my house. It did the best meat. You'd go in. It sounds low, but it was so great. They used to get a big plate of meat, and there's always an old woman who I thought must be family members or something because she didn't speak any English. So I used to give the number, and you come out with this big load of meat that would last me a week, and the rice was fantastic. And I always just say, why is this yellow? Is it butter or something? Because you didn't speak English, I could never find out what it was. So I just found out stuff.
Very trusting of you, though, to eat something you don't know. You couldn't identify what it was all that time.
No, I like weird stuff like that. Like the more weird, it's like I had right across the road. Funny enough, the first time I had frog's legs, which I'm against, but I thought it's so odd.
Why are you against frog's legs?
I don't know, it just feels it's too human. No, not too human. It's like it's too. You got to hide it in something. Put the meat in there. Don't call it frog's legs. And it's expensive. It's like £4 for 3 little legs. And then the worst thing is
everything you eat had a face.
It came out and it looked like a frog's leg, with a quadricep and a calf on it. And I thought, you got to hide that, mate. You can't eat them like that. It was nice.
Fair enough.
But
so
that was just
so what?
back to the
I was just
revolution.
Well, no, I was thinking back. So why is it's interesting that the service is called BBC Persian rather than say BBC Iran. Now, why is that?
So we are not covering only Iran. We
Yeah.
are covering Afghanistan and Tajikistan as well. So it's like a Persian language service.
right,
So what is that? Is that Farsi? Is that
Farsi.
Persian?
Farsi, yeah. So Farsi is usually
Farsi.
referred to. Yes, Farsi. Who he was Parsi, yeah.
There you go.
Queen was Parsi. So what I was saying? Come
Sorry
on,
about-
guys.
sorry about that.
That was like I'm thinking about Freddie Mercury now. Like,
Burns and culture.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's just the area that Persia.
yeah. So Farsi is the language, Persian language with Iranian dialect. We have Tajik and we have Dari, which is the Afghans speak that dialect. Persian is all of these languages.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's always a controversy about all of these namings and
Right, of course, I can
branding
imagine.
and
So was it the sort of it's the compromise name that everyone's kind of happy to.
You know, we call a Persian. Okay, so the thing is, like Farsi and Iran, there's another history to it that my historian friend's gonna kill me now. But like when the previous Shah of Iran, not his dad, actually. Wanted to modernize Iran the same time as Ataturk wanted to do the same in Turkey, he decided, okay, Iran would be a name that's like before that everyone would call us Persians because like we were Persians. He decided, okay, this is a name that unified the whole country, so we're gonna call it in all the documents and stuff Iran. So he changed it, and it changed since then. But some people, because of what Iran stands for after revolution, prefer to call it Persia and Persian.
Okay.
When was the first time you left the country?
Last time I left
The first time.
The first time. First time I went to Dubai for a conference, which was I must have been 23.
So this is as a journalist.
Work, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Work related. It was like I must have been 24 or 23.
So how did you go from sort of being a student protester to a journalist? Was that immediate switch or?
I had journalist friends. So my sister, who's 12 years older than me, she was always my role model, and she's done a lot in her life, like from sex education to like journalism. So at the time, like a couple of years before that, she had started doing a journalistic course, and then I knew her friends. She never went to work as a journalist, but then I knew her friends, and through them I was went to this news agency called Iranian Student News Agency. So as a student you could go there and do freelance for free. And then I went there and they said oh, we like you, come on board. And then, sorry, I'm just making a lot of noises. BBC tables are
we don't.
Not using wooden floors and glass tables. You have to float in this room.
Yes, holding. So then after that, I became a journalist and then just continued.
Did you want to specialize early days in any specific type of journalism?
I was a specialized because my parents again came to me and said come on, you're not going to cover politics.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
They're like, do film reviews.
I feel for them now.
You are just a real rebel.
20 years later, I'm just against all of the things they said. Anyway, so I started focusing on tourism in Iran, which back in the days, they were they would think all the tourists, and still some of them, they think that the tourists are spies set by the government of different countries to spy on you. So to change that mindset, it took a lot of time and long conversations, but then it grew. So during now from a small office in the culture ministry, now it's the ministry itself. So within the 20 years, 2 decades, I hope not right now, but then I can say that up to 5 years ago, you could see tourism flourishing in Iran and changing, but not now.
And is it safe for tourists to go over there? I mean, completely. I mean,
I don't know what to say.
I suppose, yeah.
Like, it's like
Well, yeah, you haven't been
so random that, like,
right.
you never know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, because my father and I came back from Krakow and we bumped into, I think it's that thing, if you hear someone talking your same language. And it
But
was
just recently.
Yeah, and it was just coming back, actually. And it was an Iranian lady, and she was saying, oh, you should come to Iran
It's
sometime.
beautiful.
Well, that's what
People are amazing.
But we just thought, if things go, because obviously things are, they fluctuate, but at the moment, I would say broadly things are very tense between the UK
Yeah.
the government. I don't have anything against an
Yeah,
Iranian
yeah,
person,
yeah.
I don't give a shit. But, you know, between the governments, so you think, oh, if something goes wrong, do
Yeah.
you then become leverage?
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
we worried about. We just thought, if we're, you know, in the same way that the UK might do to, you know, Iranians living over here, I think probably less so. But
There's
they
no
might go,
stability day.
yeah, you might just go, oh God, if there's if we've done something, you know, we've put some sanctions on, is it suddenly, you know? And I work in media, so it's like, oh, he's definitely here spying. You know, it's that sort of thing that pops into your head, because even when I went to China, although it's very, I'm where the government systems are very different, but in China I had to sign. I had to get my boss and my main employer to give me, sign a letter saying he's not here working. I don't work in journalism.
This is a random holiday.
Yeah, this is when I went to China. Yeah,
You still had to get the.
yeah.
letter
So I
from your
work on
boss?
like a game, basically a game show, and they were like, "Oh, he's not here making documentaries to try
Oh,
and
right.
overthrow the government."
Oh, media. Cause
yeah, because it was me. But they said anything with the word media. Because I rung up and I
Right.
said, I don't work for, I rung up the tour operator, and I said, I don't work in journalism whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they said, don't worry, if you've got the name media, so
Yeah.
if you're selling phones in Virgin Media,
Right,
if you're
okay.
selling people
Yeah, yeah,
mobile
yeah.
phones, you still have to get one of these letters, because the Chinese government are just going to look at that and say, that says media,
Yeah.
so you're here maybe spying.
But I think the big difference, as you mentioned, is like the Chinese government wouldn't arrest you usually.
I mean,
Is
certainly
that
we
what
were on a
the-
tour group as well. That was
Yeah.
the thing.
Oh, really?
So I think that would be trickier. You'd have to be doing something. I mean, it was when we went on the tour. It was interesting. I was surprised how freely the guides spoke
Oh,
about
really?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was they.
What
but
year is this?
This was last year.
Oh,
But they
okay.
talked about that. So they said that we have issues where obviously we don't have democracy like you have. You'll get people to vote for, but they're all from the same party. It's just you get to pick which one of the
Right,
five people
okay.
from the party
Yeah.
you vote for.
Oh, okay.
So they said, we're kind of there, we're getting
Yeah.
there.
Right.
But a lot of them said, oh, but we're sorting out the economy first and democracy will come after that.
Yeah.
More like that. And you thought,
I only said that to you.
yeah. And
Yeah.
but you have different guides going around the country. You had your main national guide and then a different guide in the area. And you thought, is someone going to take him off the bus?
Yeah,
And like,
yeah,
do I
This is
protest or
last
not?
day.
Yeah. And even when we went to Beijing.
After
they
lunch,
said-
where's so and so gone?
yeah, it's just like, where's Eddie gone? Eddie, there was no Eddie.
Yeah.
But even when we went to Beijing, and they said, obviously we're going to Tiananmen Square. You know more about that. You'll been read more about that
right,
than
yeah.
we're allowed to, but
Right, yeah.
we know about it. Said on the bus, if you want to ask me any questions about what happened, I mean they didn't say what happened,
Right,
but if
yeah.
you want anything that
Yeah.
happened, ask me. Once we're off the bus and in the square, nothing.
Right.
Because there'll be
okay.
secret police and FBI, and they're the equivalent of
Right.
FBI
Yeah, I'm
going
surprised
around.
you got that much out of
Listen,
them anyway.
yeah, it was quite surprising. I mean, they did say that criticism of Mao is more acceptable now, in the sense that they talk about him having the two sides of being the revolutionary, the guy that saved them during the war, and then also over, because the Kuomintang weren't nice people either, or aren't nice people either. Taiwan is a one-party country. It's still, although it has more developed in terms of economically, it's more on the face of it like a Western country. It's still one party. It's all, I think everyone that's ran it is either is related to Chiang Kai-shek. I can't say that name.
Right.
The guy the military dictator
Yeah.
of Taiwan. So
Okay.
it's the equivalent of, I can't think of an example, but somebody, it's how the Castros have.
Right.
ruled
Yeah.
it. So same idea, but it's so. But they're saying, so he did this, but then he did some very bad decisions later, like the Great Leap Forward and all that was complete disaster, and millions died because of his bad decision. So they said it was quite interesting actually for us to see
Yeah,
that.
surprised.
Yeah, I mean, how does that? Can
No,
people?
I think like I was, when you were talking, I was thinking about like at some point all the dictators or like authoritarian regimes, they have to let it go, like because people would find their ways. It's
Yeah.
like the population
There's
is
too
like
many of
water.
them, yeah.
It would find a way to just adjust it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
their own needs. So I don't think like it can last for long. It like you would see the signs that like this wouldn't work.
Yeah,
So it's just the terms, like it's just talking about like how you kind of come to terms with it. So some governments, they try to normalize some of this stuff and then open up. And I think that's what happened with China a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, like with North Korea, not going to happen soon. With Iran, I don't think it's happening at the moment.
It sounds like the opposite of what's happening with Trump, like normalizing the bad stuff.
Yeah,
it's the opposite. It's going down. It's normalizing all the terrible things he's doing.
But I mean, has it always been? I mean, I looked once at a diagram. It was because of explaining of how the system works, and I went, no wonder people can't make change, because you go, who's actually who's steering the ship?
Yeah.
You know, because you looked at it, you're like,
yeah.
So they report to him, who reports to them. That's round in a circle up to the Revolutionary Guard. Obviously, you got the Ayatollah at the very top, and then but who's in charge? And I just thought it was.
You know what I think? Like it happened. It was like this guy who has started the whole thing, and then like he has these friends, and then each of them tried to kind of like create their own power.
Yeah.
And then like it got to the point right now you have this one big name there, and you have the next generation, children, people who are relying on his finances and all of that. And then you have the trickle of other power to the people who've been through that, their aids throughout these years. And then there's a fight in there.
Yeah.
Like it looks like right now everyone is worried that like what's going to happen in future, who's going to be the supreme leader, and they don't have a figure for that. So
there isn't a groomed successor.
There are some successors that they're talking about, but the power struggle is much bigger and deeper to say there is a winner right now.
Yeah.
So a lot of talks, like a couple of years ago when was it a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, the former president of Iran died. He was one of the famous, like, prominent figures of the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were thinking he would choose, because he chose this supreme leader in a way, and then he fell apart from each other.
Oh, okay.
And then a lot of people are thinking, he's going to choose
the
next.
Current Ayatollah wasn't chosen by...
He was chosen by the... Council of Experts.
That's it, yeah.
Council of Experts. You see, it's so complicated. But there is a famous speech that this guy did. So he was the president at the time, or he was the head of he had a lot of like roles and executive roles. I think at the time he was the head of the parliament. He went to this Council of Experts and said, Aghay Khomeini, the first supreme leader, I told him that there is no one who can do your job. And he told me, why not, Mr. Khamenei? So, and he said that story in that council, and then after that, Khamenei got the vote to become the supreme leader.
Because he's been Ayatollah longer than Khomeini was, isn't he now, I think?
Khamenei?
So the first...
As a supreme leader, he's longer than Khomeini. Khomeini was like less than 10 years, but he's...
but then he doesn't have... There's not someone groomed waiting in the wings.
No, I think he was afraid. Like there was so much battle inside that like he didn't do it throughout years. He did try to bring some people, and all of them, like one way or another, like they deviated from his point of views. So we've heard a lot of other names throughout years, but they're all out of picture. Right now, there is the head of the judiciary system that people are saying, he might become the next supreme leader, who was running in the presidential election last time. And he's conservative. But then the House struggle, the House power of... the struggle in the House of Power, which we call so he has this house, kind of like an old style of the haram, and like you have this kind of they call it bait, so it's his house, and he has children, he has like allies and people like in there that they build.
So almost like his own little court.
Yeah,
his own
little court, and then like head of this. I don't know, like international relations, or head of like running the countries, and that like he has a lot of advisors in that sense. So there's so many players in the game right now.
Is there any political opposition, or is it just
they're inside the country? Not anymore.
Nothing.
The two former candidates for the presidency who became the opposition during 2009 are still in house arrest.
Oh, right.
So they cannot leave their house.
So when did the BBC World Service come along with you? What were you doing before that? Just before they came along? The journalism for the BBC World.
Me?
Yeah.
Like in general, I was doing. The last job I had was like for the mayor's newspaper, like working online, because the job before that was for this reformist newspaper, and I got like our newspaper got banned. Like we used to have like 3 or 4 jobs at the same time, because like you would go to a newspaper and like the day after they would say, oh, it's banned. So you had to move to another place. Yeah. But then when that happened, the last one, when they banned Sharp newspaper, that was the name, I was like, I need to live. I need a source of money. And then the other news agency that I was always working in, I was focusing on tourism in there, and always paid me. They got to financial troubles, and I didn't have any source of income. And I said, okay, I'll go work for this one. And one of my mentors, like a teacher at university, Dr. Younes, he told me that, like, okay, I'll find you a job. I'm running this team. Come work with me. Well, one of the first things he told me was, like, the head of the publication, he was part of those committee that would ban newspapers. Right. So he said, like, she cannot use her name in the articles she publishes. I worked there like for 7 months, I think, but then like after the 3rd month, they allowed me to publish under my own name.
So what did you publish as? Was it under a male pseudonym? Was that the issue?
No, just no name.
Oh, okay.
No name. But then I was doing nothing. Like I was reporting, I was making a database on countries around the world. I decided, okay, this is better than, like, if I want to do nothing, I better to do something that at least people can use it later. So like I created this database of the world countries, the political systems around the world, food, how to make, I don't know, like a food page. Oh my God. Well, the things you do for life. Just earning.
We all have bills to pay.
Yes. So when that happened, and then like I got a call from BBC. So I kind of headhunted, because they've seen like I did a course on multi-journalism before, and they've seen my my work as a journalist, and when they were recruiting, I was afraid, I should be honest, I was afraid to apply, because the test was in the British Embassy, and so you have to go through the written test, and I was like, if I go there, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Like, I have a lot in my plate. I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I want to move out of here. I was like, okay, let's see. And then 3 months later, they called me and said, if you want a job, there is still a space. We can do it like through phone call not going to the embassy and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it must be
a risk.
Wouldn't there be someone outside, someone taking?
Yeah, they knew who, and they actually managed to drag back a couple of people who got the job and came here, put pressure on their family, and they left.
Yeah, of course.
They went back to Iran.
Yeah, and then, but you did get out, as it were.
Yes, I got out.
And was that was there an immediate sort of backlash from the government, as it were, against you, or?
No, at the time, I left on 26th of December 2008. So I landed here on that day. For that period, there was nothing. I think in April or May, they just called my dad and like asked, "Where's your daughter? Okay. Is she working with?"
And how did your parents respond to you leaving?
They were happy for me.
Okay.
Because they've seen my life throughout those years, and like they always thought,
like,
okay.
Maybe they thought reverse psychology. They were like, we told her not to go into journalism,
let her go.
So if we say go,
she might not go. It's actually true because that was the answer they gave to the guy. And so like, she never listens to us. Whatever she said.
But I suppose they have to say that as well. Even if they think that, they probably have to say we tried we locked her up but she snuck out because
she doesn't listen to us.
Yeah, because otherwise,
And it started straight away, did it? The harassment.
That was one phone call. So it was like, we thought, oh, okay, they just want to know who's there, who's where. After like around a year after, then they called for my family to just, because by that time I started doing like more political reports. At the beginning I was like, I'm behind the scene most of the time. Oh, the lovely job of writing the tickets and the straps and the text on the TV. So that's where you start in TV in general. Like they send you down into the gallery and they're like, yeah, just write those things. And then it took some time to get to where I was. But then in a year I was doing political reports,
so now,
mostly, and then
And then what happened then? The phone calls became more frequent.
It wasn't just phone calls; like it was summoning. So at some point they raided our house. They confiscated books, computers, CDs.
Your parents' house.
My parents' house, and then like they had a satellite dish. That was a good reason to go in and say, "Oh, you have a satellite dish," and then they said, tell your daughter we're gonna give her a job. So like it was this kind of carrot and stick kind of play.
And did you go back?
No.
So have you not been back since?
I haven't been back. Like if I go back, there's no guarantee I can get out.
I'm thinking there wasn't a couple of years where you could still go back and you just knew straight away there was problems.
Mine happened like within a year, so I didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I was
but some people actually managed to go back within the first 2 years.
I see, okay.
So your parents were getting harassed. What else happened then? That they were just trying to get you back in under any means. They're giving you a job. They're giving you.
Yeah, so they tried different tactics, and then like at some point they were like, my brother they sat with my brother, and then he called me and said, "Oh, can you come and like that was like a really weird phone call I had, like the weirdest phone call I had with my brother because we are like our relationship is different, so he wouldn't call and say, "Oh, when am I gonna see you next? Shall we go to Armenia and meet each other?" I was like, we talk about that before, like you tell me that. And then I was like, I realized there's something wrong, and I said like, "Oh, I don't have time, I'm really busy right now," and stuff. And then later he called, they were sitting next to me and like pushing me to call you and say, because they want to get like, so that the message they wanted him to send me was like, come to a third country, not any country. There were like specific countries that they could feel safe in it, and we will come as well and talk to her. It was like, what? Yeah. And then my brother said like, there's an embassy, you have an embassy in London, send them over. Then the other thing was like they suspend him from university because he's teaching at university. So they suspend him, the Besiege in university this time. They suspend him for a semester.
Under what pretense?
That was really blunt. His sister is working for the enemy of the state. Excuses. So it's like, because the Besiege was able to come and say, "Oh, we don't want these like anti-revolutionaries," But my brother is like a wrestling hero in Iran as well, like so he's famous, and then like he has his own relations, and that's how in Iran works. So I don't think anything BBC did worked, but. Helps, but it was just his own initiative.
So have your parents come over here?
Oh yes, finally after 9 years, last year they managed to come because their visa got like year. And this is happening. Like this is serious problem that I haven't seen. Like to see my family, I had to go to Turkey because my brother's visa got rejected. My sister's visa got
from the UK.
From the UK, and this is like a normal thing that happens to us. Because the border agency says, "Oh, it had nothing to like, we don't know what's happening, and then like it's not our responsibility to grant visa to your families." So,
but it is the UK that's saying no, denying them entry. So it's not the Iranian
not the Iranians, the UK. So they can. It's really difficult to get visa for Iranians to come to UK.
Oh, I thought it was,
and there's no cushions for us to say, okay, we are not allowed to go back because we are working for BBC, and if there's any way you can, make this easier for them to come over and see us.
That's surprising.
So how did you get the parents over? Has something changed recently in the laws, or?
No, we managed to just paid a lot for a lawyer and then like go back and forth. and finally got them a visa.
And how long did they stay for?
1 month.
Just a month.
Wow.
So they go back. I mean, so what's the situation now then? Now, can they come back now if they wanted to?
No, their visa expired, but it was 6 months. 6 months visitor visa. But
there's not going to be a problem now if they decided to come back, or you have to go through the whole thing again.
No, we have to go to the whole thing again. That's why we decided to. Usually, it's easier to visit each other in Turkey because the cost is much less, and for a while, like there was no embassy. If I don't know if you remember, like the Iranians, they invaded the embassy in Tehran, so there was no embassy to actually do the visa process. So
now there's a lot of problems with women journalists specifically.
Yes.
So what I mean, have they given up on journalism? Specifically women that they don't like.
The thing is, like, I think the Iranian government. I'm saying this. I'm gonna get sacked from BBC, but it's all right because I believe in it. I truly believe in it that the Iranian government is afraid of women.
Yeah,
it's like anything related to women empowering. It scares them so much that they go through a lot to make sure that doesn't happen. Like, look at what's happening right now in Iran. Like, they are arresting women who are not wearing hijab, and then they say, like, it became this fundamental turning point for the whole government that everyone is saying, if you allow them to not wear, if it's not mandatory, is it your government going to collapse? And the answer is yes. For them, that means the collapse of everything they built. Yeah. There are two dimensions to the Islamic Republic that they've been putting in children's mind from the day one.
Right.
One is we are an enemy of Israel, and Israel is enemy of us. And then the second one is women's right. Women's hijab, mandatory hijab is the second pillar of that government. And it feels like there's been a lot of change in terms of like how women dress and what is normal in the society and what is not. But the government doesn't want to make it public because as soon as it becomes public, one of its pillars is coming down.
Yeah. So I suppose it would be admitting fallibility.
Yes, it's attached to everything. If one goes, then the whole thing could.
If you're wrong about one,
we have to be absolutely right and nothing else.
We keep having to say that the sky is green.
Was it Iran a few years ago? Women can drive now. Was that
Saudi
no? We always
Saudi Arabia.
Right. That was Saudi Arabia.
Because Iran is not as strict as Saudi Arabia is.
No, we have in general, Iranian women are much more educated than men.
Yeah.
They usually do science, STEM fields, because they know there is nothing that can prevent them in STEM from getting a job. So if you study humanities or like something different, there's always a possibility that a man, because the government intentionally put this criteria in, like, so now even for the women and for the concours, which is like a university exam, there's like criteria that certain universities get more men, just making sure the men have the upper hand in the society.
Yeah.
So women found their ways, and it's a really forward-thinking society for women in terms of how they manage their lives. But because there's a government who's pushing down and oppressing women, there's this battle ongoing, and a lot of energy is going wasted there instead of these women becoming creative and creating a lot of things that can help the society. Actually,
are the people winning slowly? Like, are they pushing? Is it going to happen in a couple of generations?
I was so optimistic when I was in Iran.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of good news to end.
Yeah, I was super optimistic when I was in Iran. Like, in a sense that I would look back at 80s in Iran, and I'm thinking, okay, like from painting the hand, now we got to where we can listen to music, or like thinking, it's changing, it's slowly. But then what I see from outside, like 10 years of being away from it, I see the roller coaster. It's not always up or always down.
You would think when the generation goes, and new people for new mindsets
but I think
take over.
Are they looking at what's happened elsewhere in the region, but also globally, and going, right? So let's get ahead of this. Let's clamp this down now. Let's
The problem is, like, there's so many other aspect to it. So none of these issues is a simple issue. It's all complex issues. So it's not related to only the government in a sense of political stand. It's related to everything. For example, environmental issues. Now it's massive in Iran. So like if you have a water shortage, you're gonna have to put in place some sort of criteria. And who can guarantee in a corrupt system that criteria is the right criteria? There is no water, in general, water management in Iran, and that's why it led to this kind of chaotic position we have. Right now, there are 11 activists, environmental activists in jail because they're counted as spies. One of them got beaten and dead in the prison, Qaboos Said Emami. So it's this.
But why are they battling them? Why are they an enemy of the state?
The government say they were spies for Israel.
But
not the government. One fraction of the government says that. The other fraction says no, he wasn't a spy. He was working with us.
But why?
So that seems like they're the pawns of.
And then the other people is like they're just working with him, like they were in the same company.
Okay.
But why do they not like the environmentalists? Like, is it messes with big business or something?
So imagine a society, like imagine a group of friends. They're really close to each other, and they achieve something, and they get in charge of this company. And then after a years, like there are new generation coming in, new people with new ideas, but these people are really hang out with each other in this circle, and they believe in like certain things should be done in certain ways. This outside world is changing, they don't change. Anything you say to them that points out their incompetency, their mismanagement.
I was going to say it's about management. It's not about the thing. It could be absolutely anything. It just is messing with somebody's personality.
Right. So if someone said, "Oh, the bins aren't collected regularly,"
and I say it can become like a big issue.
Because
you're enemy of the
state.
state.
Your family being jailed because of it.
That's terrible. How do you sort of operate day to day in terms of, because you've got this sort of sword of Damocles hanging over you, where it's, you can't go home. Could something happen? Could a phone call come? Could it be? How do you, is there a thing of, is there, do you have like safe words on this? And again, I don't want to give all your secrets and things, but is it like, is that how you have to operate, or are you able to operate in this country at least quite freely? Or
in this country, I operate quite freely, and I think the biggest challenge is the mental health part of it. So it doesn't matter like how free you are here. There's this, Damocles hanging out, kind of like guilt. I put my parents in that position. I brought it down for them, but you learn, like you adapt, because I didn't sign up for a war. I signed up for like a little of battle. I had that personality, but it wasn't, this is a full war because they have the money. There's like trolling online. There's like getting calls and then like from Evin prison. There's like really weird stuff happening and mocking my face on videos and photoshopping, like really weird stuff.
It's so charming.
There's sexual fantasies, like
that's
you can
usually
see
the go-to.
Like they make up stories, like sexual stories. Anyway,
because I was curious. I was looking at your Twitter feed and I thought, I wonder how trolled you are. Because journalists, even our journalists here are trolled by people.
Even if there's nothing
for whatever. And then I was like, I can't read.
Oh yes, I try to tweet the only version.
I was even looking at replies and I thought, I don't know. They could be saying, I'm gonna lie to myself and saying they're all just saying lovely things. I'm sure that's the case.
No, there's a lot of trolling, and it's like a different kind of trolling. So you have like the governmental, you have oppositions, you have crazy people.
Have you got any plans like long term then? Is there any things you want to set up, or is there any committees that you want to be part of? Is there?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of things I want to do in life. But right now I'm breaking from BBC, not for these reasons. It's just like I've been in BBC for 10 years. Now I want to change in a new way. So there are a couple of options. One is like I'm starting, hopefully not long term, my own communication company, and like thinking about how to represent women, because one of the things that is really close to my heart is women's right. you can guess. One is that. One is like I've been talking to my friend Kaya about like having a podcast about.
See, all the coolest people have podcasts.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah.
Free speech, man.
Yeah. Talking about like our life in
Yeah.
general. Like one of the things that we came across is like we as a woman, professional woman, we don't have shared experience like exists somewhere that we can tap into and say, okay, this is how you overcome this like colleague who says in your face, women and men are not equal. You know, that sort of little things.
You have colleagues that say that women.
In general, like
I
in
can
Iran,
understand
that's a normal
attitudinal,
thing.
but literally someone says.
Yeah. In Iran, it's like,
Oh, I see. In Iran or here?
oh, it happens everywhere around the world.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere around.
I mean, the longer you talk to a woman, you hear their experiences, you go, "Wow, men really are. We
You
really are
forget.
just garbage, aren't we? We are just
No, come on.
It's just,
There's some little. No.
Yeah, everyone.
No, but but my dream thing is like I need to make money for it because I need it to be completely independent and from any funding.
Yeah, of
So I
course.
need to become a businesswoman and
Yeah.
become a really, really
Yeah.
wealthy to have this conference to bring together the Iranians from outside and let them just talk to each other. Like one of the problems Iran has is like we as a society, we as a population, we don't have a vision of the future, how it looks like.
Right,
Sorry.
yeah.
I'm going to say that again, or it's going to make any difference. So the Iranian in general, as a public, we don't have a dream about Iran. We don't know what it should look like as a society, as a kind of like common sense. We know what we don't want.
Yeah.
And we always talk about that.
Yeah.
We always talk about the issues, but we never had this opportunity
what
to
next?
imagine what can be done, like what it could look like
Yeah.
if we all work together. We never have that. And all of the oppositions outside are coming in and they all like say, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But nobody talks about how they're going to change
Yeah.
it.
I think, yeah, because, I mean, obviously it's very different, you don't want to blanket everything, but when you looked at the Arab Spring and you looked at what happened, often it seemed like the reason most of them, with the exception of sort of Tunisia, but not really, is that there was no, let's just get rid of the old
Yeah.
and we have nothing new. And so then it becomes, oh, well, we'll just have this provisional government of general whoever,
Military, yeah.
and then he'll get overthrown next week, and it's
Yeah.
the provisional government of thingy, and then
Yeah.
it becomes the Democratic Republic of, which always means the fascist
Yeah,
dictatorship
yeah.
of. There's never, you always think you've got to have what's next. That's
Yeah.
the problem, yeah.
So it'd just be about giving people a voice to decide where do we go from here. Now that we know where we are, what do we do now?
Yeah. So like I want to bring in like experts on different fields. For
Yeah.
example, people who are working in tech and Iranians in Silicon Valley, there's so many of them. Bringing them together and say, okay, what would be your telecommunication look like in your ideal Iran? How
Yeah.
it should like operate? Who should have how much regulation you want in there? Like, so just allow these ideas to be out there, and maybe at some point as a society we can come together and decide on that.
Yeah.
But not having the knowledge about what is out there, what
Yeah.
are our options, is the biggest challenge we are
Especially
facing
when
as a
everybody's
nation.
very separated. Everyone has to get together because that's where the will comes from. Oh, there's other people that I thought that, but I didn't know other. Then that's how it all happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I said to you before, something that stuck with me. That was he was talking about I can't remember, it was in a book or something, and it was about two guys, and it was a story about two high-powered politicians in the Agora in Greece, and one says to the other one at the market, he says, I was talking to one of these slaves the other day, but I didn't know he was a slave. He was wearing the robes just like us, and he was annoyed. He said they shouldn't be allowed to have enough money to buy robes because we want to look like us and they should look like them. And he said we should make them wear a band or something so we know who they are. And the other guy said to him, no, brother. He said, no, because then they'll know how many of them there are and how few of us there are. And I thought that sort of stayed with me for life. The vast majority of people are fairly normal, balanced mind, but it's those tiny ones. And if you just could sort of visualize it, you'd go, what are we doing? Let's just go and take over. I'm not saying let's go for the revolution again.
He does this every week. We'll be
Oh,
talking about
it
anything.
would be
Have
so
revolution every
easy.
He calls for...
But it's because of things like that. You go, I said to somebody in a hotel recently, Marta, who was just here, and she was saying, like, how did you put the thing together in the magazine, all these people? And I said, because I didn't grow up thinking there was any hierarchy, because I had nothing. Like, I lived on the streets. I didn't know. I didn't learn it. You learn that. It's not given to you. And I said, like, so would you go and ask somebody that's sitting over here, and like next to us in the hotel or something? And you go, well, not really. You go, but they're you. So imagine somebody was saying it backward. You'd go, what are you talking about? Of course I'd ask them something. And when you realise, like how I put the magazine together with everything, was because I thought, there's just weird people in different industries. There's no rules, so everyone's you. So just go and speak to people. But I think that's when you get the will of when you do it, and then there's 2 people, then there's 4 people, and then eventually there's so many people go, do you remember a time when we were sort of all like, we didn't know we could do this? And it's so normal, but it takes that getting people together so they can see the other human beings that have also made the effort to go, oh, I'm like you here. And then the ideas sprout out of nowhere that you can't plan for. They come out of somewhere from people being there. So I'm all for that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the current regime were the outsiders. They were the rebels. They were the exiles.
Oh, really?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They were like during the Shah's reign, they had some oppositions, but the thing was, like, it was a lot of other people involved, and it all comes down to look at the power play in different contexts, and how, like, back then they were playing like the minority game, and they were against this massive power, and then it flipped, and then how they forgot their own positions back then, and then like became the dictators.
Yeah. Well, that's the story everywhere. I mean, you only got to look at the Trump, when some of the stuff they film of their back in the 80s of people giving speeches about.
There's a wonderful.
Right, we've got to finish up. So
okay,
go say what you're going to say.
In the film Cromwell, it's highly dramatised, but there's a bit where Cromwell gets fed up with the Parliament, and he just says, "You've all wasted time. You've all done this. You've all done that. Out." Yeah. He kicks out the Parliament, and as Thomas Fairfax, who was his best friend during the war, walks past him, he says, "I seem to recall we cut off a king's head for an act such as this." And he leaves him. That's how people always forget.
Well, change is always
exactly
messy.
Yeah.
It just takes. I remember there's in the what's the Spanish religion, the Brazilian crosses with the Brazilian Santeria. There's I'm getting their names now. I think it's Chungo. There's some god. There's various gods like the Greek myths, and one of them says, why is it wherever you go, like he's a god of change and things like that. He said, wherever you go, there's problems. He said, you're supposed to come in and make things okay. And he said, but within war there's peace. I mean, within war there's change. And you go, yeah, change, it's not easy, but somebody's got to go out there and go, look, let's go. It doesn't happen automatically. So within war there's change, but within change there's war. What did I say?
I don't know.
Okay.
We got the gist.
I hope no.
Yeah. But basically, you've got to
Doesn't
change stuff. You've got to do stuff.
literal
It's got to be messy. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
But every now and again, it takes somebody to go, okay, I'll bloody well do it.
Yeah.
And that means even with like the business, you've got to go out and get people together. They won't do it automatically. So I'm all for that. I like that sort of act.
So is there something we can point people towards for you in terms of like a blog or a site or your Twitter? Please don't troll.
Yeah, they can follow my LinkedIn, and
Yeah.
my LinkedIn is going to become more English friendly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because I know. Because I looked, I thought, I've got nothing here. I can't
Yeah, sorry. Because it's like I'm not a social media person. in
Yeah,
general.
it's hard, isn't it,
Even
when
though
you
I'm
get
like
used to it.
encouraging other people to do marketing on social media, I'm like lazy.
Yeah.
But so in between all of these, I decided, okay, I only have like Twitter, which is I'm active somehow. I have Instagram, Facebook, all of these accounts, but I don't use them much.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn is the platform that I post in English. I think I posted one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Start.
No,
Gotta start somewhere.
yeah. I think you guys gonna do that job for me.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put something on there. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But you can get Google Translator. So I would say whatever you post,
Oh
just
my
put
God!
it in there.
Don't do that! Don't do that!
Mind
it's
you
like
can't trust
so
it.
much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hear the
you never
stuff
know
from
what
now.
words
You
are going
never
to pop
know.
up. Listen, well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really
Thank you
appreciate
for
it. It's been really
inviting
great, and I'm all for the revolutionary acts. I like meeting people like her, like from a youth. Like, don't push at me because I'll just push back, and it's irrelevant. Like,
Born rebel,
good and evil. I love the good and evil battle because that's what it is. And you got to remember, there's people went before you. This is why I used to get animated about things. People fought for your rights to not go up chimneys or be pushed into fire engines to clean them out. Red hot train engines. So, but you don't know their names. But you have to understand the fact you can do what you do is because other people who don't know their names lived and died, and you're just one of them people. So you've got to do it. So when I was putting the magazine together, I used to say to people, bloody well do something decent, because people did it for you. You just don't know their names. So so I like all that sort of story. So thank you very much for coming on the show, and really appreciate it. And we'll see you. We'll have you back one day to talk about the revolution. Continue.
Give us an update.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.